The sun hung low over the dusty back roads of Willow Creek County, painting the cracked asphalt in shades of orange and shadow. It was one of those late afternoons where the air tasted like regret, thick with the scent of wild sage and distant rain that never came. 8-year-old Tommy Harlan huddled against the rusted guardrail of Route 17, his small frame shaking not from the chill, but from the fresh marks blooming purple across his arms. He clutched his faded backpack like a shield, eyes wide and darting toward the empty horizon, as if expecting the world to swallow him whole. The boy had run, far from the sagging trailer on the edge of town, far from the raised voices and slamming doors that echoed like thunder in his nightmares. But now, alone with the wind whispering through the mesquite trees, terror clawed at his chest. He was just a kid, marked by secrets too heavy for his shoulders, and in that moment of raw vulnerability, he wondered if anyone would ever see the truth hidden beneath his torn shirt. The low rumble shattered the silence first, a deep, guttural growl that built like an approaching storm. Tommy froze, heart pounding, as a lone figure crested the hill on a weathered Harley, its chrome catching the dying light like a blade. Ethan Ridge Harlan, no relation to the boy, but fate has a way of weaving tangled threads, throttled down as he spotted the child. At 42, Ethan was a ghost of the open road, his leather vest scarred from years of riding with the Iron Vow crew, a brotherhood forged in the fires of forgotten wars and unbreakable oaths. His face lined with the weight of losses he never spoke of, a wife taken too soon by illness, a brother lost to the bottle, held the quiet storm of a man who'd promised himself long ago to walk away from the chaos. But something in the boy's hunched form pulled at him, an echo of his own buried pain. Ethan killed the engine, the sudden quiet amplifying the boy's ragged breaths. He swung off the bike, boots crunching gravel, and approached slow, hands open like he was taming a wild thing. "Hey, kid," Ethan said, voice gravelly but soft, crouching to eye level. Tommy flinched, pulling his sleeves down instinctively, but the biker's gaze sharpened on the glimpse of bruised skin. "You all right? Looks like you've been through a scrape." The boy hesitated, tears streaking dirt on his cheeks. Then in a burst of desperation he rolled up one sleeve. The marks told a story no child should know, faded welts and fresh shadows, signs of aggression that twisted Ethan's gut. This wasn't a playground tumble, this was deliberate, hidden hurt. Tommy's voice cracked as he whispered, They hurt me at home, said if I tell, it'll be worse." Ethan's jaw tightened, a flicker of rage igniting behind his calm eyes. He thought of his own scars, not the visible ones from bar fights or road wrecks, but the deeper kind, from a promise made to his dying wife to protect the innocent, a vow he'd let gather dust amid his solitary rides. In that instant, as the boy's trembling hand reached out, Ethan felt the weight of it all crash down. This wasn't just a stop on the road, it was a reckoning, a call to honor that promise and rally the shadows of his past into something unbreakable. Ethan didn't hesitate. He pulled a worn bandana from his pocket, gently wrapping it around Tommy's arm like a makeshift bandage. His calloused fingers steady despite the storm inside. "Listen to me," he murmured, meeting the boy's wide eyes. "You're safe now. No one's going to lay a hand on you again, not while I'm breathing." Tommy nodded, a spark of hope flickering in his fear, and for the first time that day, he didn't feel so small. Ethan lifted him onto the bike's passenger seat, the engine roaring back to life like a beast awakened. They rode toward town, the wind whipping tears from Tommy's eyes, but now they were tears of release. Willow Creek was a place of quiet secrets, corrupt sheriffs turning blind eyes, families fractured by poverty and pride, but Ethan's arrival stirred the first ripples. He knew calling in the crew meant dragging his old life back, the Iron Vow, 50 strong, scattered across the counties like wolves in waiting, men who'd fought beside him in desert sands, women who'd patched their wounds with quiet grace. They'd made promises too, oaths of loyalty that time couldn't erode. By dusk, they pulled into the gravel lot of Mama's Diner, a neon-lit haven on the town's frayed edge. The scent of frying onions and strong coffee hit Ethan like a memory, pulling him back to nights when the crew gathered here, sharing stories under the hum of fluorescent lights. Tommy clung to him, whispering fragments of his nightmare, an uncle's temper, a mother's weary silence, the cycle of hurt passed down like a cursed heirloom. Ethan listened, his mind already mapping the path ahead. He couldn't just drop the kid at the station. The law in Willow Creek was tangled in favors and fear, deputies more loyal to local power than justice. No, this called for the kind of reckoning that came from the heart, not a badge. As the diner door jingled open, heads turned, truckers, waitresses, a few locals nursing beers. Ethan settled Tommy at a corner booth, ordering pie and milk, then stepped outside to make the call. The phone crackled to life under the star-pricked sky. "Ridge, that you, brother?" The voice on the other end belonged to Marcus, his second in command, a burly vet with a laugh like thunder and eyes that had seen too much. Ethan laid it out plain, the boy, the bruises, the promise stirring in his blood. There was a pause. Then Marcus's tone shifted to steel. "We're riding, full crew. Dawn breaks, Willow Creek feels the vow." Ethan hung up, leaning against his bike, the cool metal grounding him. He'd walked away from the Brotherhood after his wife's passing, burying himself in endless miles to outrun the grief. But promises don't die. They wait, patient as the road. Tommy watched from the window, a small smile breaking through, and Ethan knew this act of stepping in would bind them all, forging a family from the ashes of solitude. The county slept unaware, but by morning the rumble of engines would echo like judgment, shaking the foundations of silence. As the first stars blinked awake, Ethan sat with the boy, sharing stories of open highways and unbreakable bonds. Tommy's eyelids grew heavy, the pie half-eaten, and in that quiet booth a fragile trust took root. Outside, the night deepened, carrying whispers of what was to come, confrontations in shadowed alleys, truths unearthed from locked drawers, a tide of loyalty crashing against corruption. Ethan traced the scars on his own knuckles, remnants of battles won and lost, and vowed silently, this time, redemption wouldn't slip away. The boy had shown him bruises, but in doing so he'd awakened a warrior's heart, setting in motion a chain of events that would shock Willow Creek to its core. The diner's neon sign flickered like a heartbeat against the encroaching night, casting erratic glows on the gravel lot where Ethan's Harley stood sentinel. Inside, the air was thick with the sizzle of grease and the murmur of late-night confessions from weary travelers. Tommy picked at the remnants of his pie, his small fingers tracing patterns in the crust, while Ethan's gaze drifted to the window, scanning the shadows beyond the parking lot. The call to Marcus had been a spark in dry tinder. Now the first embers were stirring. He could almost hear the distant rev of engines, brothers answering the unspoken summons across dusty miles. But Willow Creek wasn't a town that welcomed outsiders, especially not a biker with a haunted look and a kid in tow. Ethan knew the risks, old grudges, prying eyes, the kind of small-town justice that bent toward the powerful. A bell jingled sharply, pulling Ethan's attention back. The door swung open, admitting a figure who moved with the deliberate grace of someone who'd seen too many sunrises on the wrong side of dawn. Lila Sparks. Donovan, a wiry woman in her late 30s with ink-black hair tied back and a toolkit slung over her shoulder, scanned the room until her eyes locked on Ethan. She was the crew's mechanic, a former army medic who'd traded scalpels for wrenches after the sands of deployment claimed her peace. Her face, etched with faint lines from sleepless repairs and silent sorrows, softened at the sight of Tommy. "Ridge," she said, sliding into the booth with a nod to the boy. Heard you needed backup. Marcus filled me in on the ride over. This little guy's got you playing night again." Ethan managed a half smile, the kind that didn't reach his eyes. "Not playing. The kid showed me marks that'd make a devil flinch. Uncle's got a temper from what he says, and the mother's too broken to stop it." Tommy shrank a little at the mention, but Lila reached across, her hand gentle on his shoulder, offering a warmth Ethan envied. She'd lost a sister to similar shadows years back, a loss that fueled her fire for the vow. "Hey, champ," she murmured. "You're with us now. No more hiding." The boy looked up, his eyes reflecting the diner's warm light, and for a moment the booth felt like a fortress against the night. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the loose panes and carrying the faint scent of impending rain. Ethan leaned back, recounting the details to Lila in low tones, the rundown trailer on the outskirts, the whispers of favors owed to the county sheriff, Harlan Tate, a man whose badge gleamed brighter than his conscience. Tate had a reputation for looking the other way when local families with deep roots crossed lines, especially if it kept the peace or his pockets lined. Ethan had crossed paths with him once, years ago, during a dust-up at a county fair that ended with charges dropped for the right connections. "This ain't just about the boy," Ethan said, his voice a rumble like idling thunder. "It's the whole rotten setup. If we pull this off clean, it shakes the foundations." Lila nodded, her fingers drumming the table in rhythm with her thoughts. Crews mobilizing. Marcus has 20 already geared up from the North Ridge camp. They'll hit the county line by first light, but we need eyes here. Can't ride in blind. She glanced at Tommy, who was dozing now, head pillowed on his arms. The sight twisted something in Ethan's chest, a reminder of the child he'd never had, the life his wife had dreamed of before cancer stole her away. That promise to protect the vulnerable had faded to echoes on the road, but Tommy's bruises had dragged it back, raw and insistent. Ethan stood, signaling the waitress for the check, his mind already charting the next move. They couldn't stay exposed. The uncle might come sniffing, or worse, Tate's deputies could roll by on a routine patrol. They slipped out into the cooling air, Leela hoisting Tommy gently onto her shoulder as Ethan fired up the bike. The engine's growl was a comfort, a beast loyal to its rider. They headed toward the old mill on the river's edge, a forgotten relic where the vow had held their first gatherings. Rusted silos standing like ancient sentinels under the moon. The road wound through cottonwoods, leaves whispering secrets, and Ethan felt the weight of the night pressing in. Flashes of memory intruded, his brother's last drunken rant before the crash, the way the crew had rallied then, only for Ethan to drift away in grief. Loyalty was a chain, he thought, binding you to the pain as much as the purpose, but breaking it now would mean abandoning the boy to the cycle, and that he couldn't bear. At the mill, they parked in the shadow of the silos, the structure's creaks echoing like old bones settling. Lila laid Tommy on a blanket in the foreman's loft, the space still scented with aged timber and faint oil. "Rest easy, kid," she whispered, tucking the edges around him. Down below, Ethan paced the dirt floor, phone in hand as updates trickled in. Marcus's voice cut through the static. 30 confirmed. We're ghosts till dawn, but Tate's got ears everywhere. Watch your back. Ethan pocketed the device, staring at the river's dark flow through a cracked window. The water mirrored the stars, unbroken and indifferent, much like the county's facade of normalcy. But beneath it, currents of corruption ran deep. Families like Tommy's ground down by men who wielded power like a club. A distant siren wailed, slicing the quiet, and Ethan tensed, hand drifting to the knife at his belt, not for violence, but for the resolve it symbolized. It was probably nothing, a false alarm in the night, but it stirred the ethical storm within him. Was he dragging innocence into this? The crew weren't saints. Scars from wars and roads marked them all. Yet their bond was forged in promises keener than steel, to stand for the overlooked, to carve justice from chaos. Lila joined him, her presence a steady anchor. "Doubts?" she asked, reading him like an open map. Ethan shook his head, though the lie tasted bitter. "Just the cost, but walking away. That's not who we are." As the hours crept toward dawn, the first faint rumble echoed from the horizon. A scout from the crew, tires crunching approach. Tommy stirred above, murmuring in sleep, and Ethan climbed the ladder to check on him. The boy's face, slack in repose, held a peace Ethan hadn't seen earlier. In that fragile moment, the biker's heart hardened with purpose. The county would wake to more than birdsong. It would face the Iron Vow's unyielding stand. Promises long dormant were awakening, weaving a tapestry of redemption that would test loyalties and unearth truths long buried. Willow Creek's shocked awakening was just beginning, a moral thunder rolling in from the edges of the night. And now, I invite you to leave in the comments where you're watching from and the exact hour you heard this story. We wish to know how far these northern confessions travel and at what moments they reach you. The first blush of dawn crept over the river like a hesitant confession, turning the mill's rusted silos into silhouettes etched against a pale sky. Ethan stood at the loft's edge, the cool mist rising from the water below, carrying the earthy tang of wet stone and renewal. Tommy slept soundly on the blanket, his breaths even now, the bruises on his arms hidden but not forgotten. Lila paced the creaky floorboards nearby, her toolkit clinking softly as she checked a loose panel, ever the fixer, of machines and fractured lives. The night had stretched their nerves taut, but with the crew's approach vibrating through the ground like a gathering pulse, Ethan felt the shift, from solitary guardian to the vanguard of something larger, a promise pulling threads from his past into the present. A low hum built in the distance, swelling into the unmistakable thunder of multiple engines, Harleys and choppers cutting through the morning fog like arrows loosed from the horizon. Ethan descended the ladder, boots thudding against the rungs, and stepped out into the yard where dew clung to the overgrown weeds. The lead bike emerged first, Marcus at the helm, his broad frame cutting an imposing line against the rising light. Behind him rolled a convoy of 15, then 20, leather-clad figures materializing from the mist. Veterans with salt-and-pepper beards, younger riders with fresh ink from recent runs, and a few women like Lila, their eyes sharp with shared history. They killed their engines in a cascading silence, the sudden quiet amplifying the river's murmur and the first calls of waking birds. Marcus dismounted, clasping Ethan's forearm in a grip that spoke volumes. No words needed for brothers who'd stared down worse than county shadows. "Ridge!" Marcus rumbled, his voice carrying the gravel of too many smokes and midnight watches. "Boys safe?" Ethan nodded, glancing back at the mill. "Tucked away, Lila's with him, but this runs deeper than one kid's hurt. Uncle's tied to Tate, the sheriff's got his hooks in half the trailers out here." The crew gathered in a loose semicircle, faces illuminated by the strengthening sun, their vests bearing the Iron Vow's emblem, a coiled serpent around an unbroken chain, symbol of oaths that bound tighter than blood. Among them was Noah Forge Keller, a lanky ex-marine with hands like hammered iron, from years shaping metal in desert forges. He'd lost a leg to an IED, but rode with a prosthetic that hummed faintly under his jeans. Beside him stood Abigail Echo Ramirez, a sharp-eyed nurse who'd patched more than wounds during their nomadic days, her ponytail swinging as she scanned the group with quiet authority. The air hummed with restrained energy, the scent of exhaust mingling with the fresh bite of morning. Ethan laid out the pieces. Tommy's fragmented tale of an uncle's rage-fueled outbursts, the mother's hollow excuses, the way Tate's deputies patrolled those outskirts like they owned the dirt. "This ain't about storming in," Ethan said, his words measured, eyes meeting each face. We expose it clean, get the boy to real help, force the truth into the light, vows code, protect the weak, honor the word. Murmurs rippled through the group, nods of agreement laced with the weight of their own scars. Noah leaned on his crutch, his voice steady. Remember that promise we made after the war? No one left behind. This kid's one of us now. Abigail added softly, I've seen enough ER rooms to know when the system's blind. We'll make them see. But as the sun climbed, casting long shadows across the yard, doubt flickered in Ethan's chest like a faulty spark plug. He'd pulled them from their lives, farms, garages, quiet retirements, reviving oaths he'd half buried in grief. His wife's final words echoed unbidden. Be the shield, Ethan, for those who can't. The crew embodied that chosen family, forged in foxholes and roadhouse brawls, yet dragging them into Willow Creek's web risked fractures. Tate wasn't some backwater bully. Whispers painted him as a kingpin in plain sight, trading justice for loyalty from old money families. One wrong move, and the vow could shatter against badges and bureaucracy. Lila emerged from the mill then, Tommy trailing sleepily behind her, rubbing his eyes at the sight of the assembled riders. The boy froze, awe widening his gaze at the sea of leather and chrome, but fear lingered in his stance. Ethan knelt, steadying him. These are my family, Tommy. They came for you. The group softened, voices low as they introduced themselves. Hands extended, not in threat but welcome. Tommy managed a shy nod, clutching Lila's hand, and in that exchange the moral current surged. This wasn't vengeance. It was a stand for the overlooked, a poetic justice woven from loyalty's thread. Marcus clapped Ethan on the back. Plan simple. We split, half-shadow the trailer, gather what we can without a scene. Rest of us head to town, eyes on Tate's office. Lila, you and Abby take the kid to the clinic on the edge. Neutral ground. The assignments fell into place, with practiced ease, bikes firing up in a symphony of roars that shook the dew from the leaves. Ethan mounted his Harley. Tommy secured behind Lila on hers, the convoy peeling out toward Willow Creek like a living force. The ride into town unfolded under a sky streaked with gold, the road's vibrations syncing with Ethan's pulse. Cotton fields blurred past, their white bowls like scattered promises waiting to be gathered. But as they crested the final hill, the county seat came into view, a cluster of weathered buildings hugging Main Street, the sheriff's station a squat brick fortress at its heart. Tate's cruiser sat idle out front, a deputy lounging against it with coffee in hand. The crew dispersed subtly, engines downshifting to murmurs, blending into the morning traffic of pickups and delivery vans. Ethan parked at the edge of the lot near the general store, the air now laced with the aroma of fresh-baked bread from inside. He watched Tommy go with Lila and Abby toward the clinic. The boy's small wave, a talisman against the uncertainty. Inside the store, the bell tinkled as Ethan entered, the wooden floors creaking under his boots. The shopkeeper, an older woman with kind eyes named Grace, nodded warily. Bikers weren't strangers, but a full crew spelled trouble. "Coffee?" she offered, pouring a mug without waiting. Ethan accepted, leaning on the counter as locals trickled in, their conversations hushed about the day's gossip. That's when the first ripple hit, a trucker muttering about Tate's latest favor to the Harlan clan. Tommy's kin. No coincidence in the name's echo. Ethan's ears pricked. It confirmed the rot ran deep, favors traded like currency. Outside, Noah signaled from across the street, a subtle hand gesture meaning eyes on the station, no movement yet. Tension coiled as the morning wore on, the sun baking the asphalt into shimmering waves. Ethan stepped out, phone buzzing with a text from Marcus. Scouts at the trailer, signs of recent agitation, overturned chair visible through the window, but no confrontation. The ethical tightrope stretched, pushed too hard, and it became the chaos Tate thrived on, Hold back, and the boy stayed trapped. A patrol car rolled by slow, the deputy's gaze lingering on the scattered bikes, suspicion narrowing his eyes. Ethan met it steadily, hand loose at his side, embodying the quiet courage of the vow. Redemption wasn't a blaze, it was this, the patient burn of honor against indifference. By midday, the pieces aligned. Lila called. Tommy examined at the clinic, vestiges of repeated strain, noted officially, enough to flag authorities outside Tate's reach. The crew's presence hummed through town, like an undercurrent, whispers spreading of the bikers' arrival, the boy in their care. Tate would feel it soon, the pressure building like storm clouds over the plains. Ethan straddled his bike again, the leather seat warm from the sun, and felt the promise solidify. What started with a scared child's bruises was uncoiling into a force that would force Willow Creek to confront its shadows. Loyalty's roar drowning out corruption's murmur. The county's shock was mounting, one ethical stand at a time. The midday sun beat down on Willow Creek like an unyielding interrogator, turning Main Street into a haze of heat waves that distorted the facades of clapboard shops and the squat sheriff's station. Ethan lingered outside the general store, the coffee mug still warm in his hand, its bitter steam curling up to mix with the dry dust kicked by passing trucks. The air hummed with the low buzz of cicadas and the occasional rev of an engine from the crew's scattered positions. Eyes on every corner, a network of loyalty woven through the town's veins. Tommy was safe at the clinic for now, under Abigail's watchful gaze, but Ethan could feel the noose tightening. Whispers had already spread like wildfire through the diner crowd. Bikers in town, a kid pulled from the shadows, questions aimed at the Harlan trailer. Tate's web was vibrating, and the sheriff wouldn't sit idle. Inside the station across the street, shadows shifted behind the blinds, deputies milling, radios crackling with terse exchanges. Ethan caught a glimpse of Harlan Tate himself, a barrel-chested man in his 50s with a mustache like a bristled broom, and eyes that gleamed with the cold calculation of a man who'd long ago traded his oath for convenience. Tate stepped out onto the porch, wiping sweat from his brow, his gaze sweeping the street like a hawk spotting prey. It landed on Noah, who leaned casually against his bike near the post office, polishing a chain link with deliberate slowness. The deputy from earlier murmured something to Tate, nodding toward the scattered Harleys. Ethan's pulse quickened. This was the pivot, the moment where whispers turned to action. He slipped the mug onto a windowsill and crossed the street unhurried, boots scuffing the pavement, embodying the calm before the moral storm. Ridge. Marcus's voice came low over the earpiece hidden under his collar, a trick from their old runs. Scouts report movement at the trailer. Uncle's pacing, phone in hand. Looks like he's calling in favors. Ethan nodded subtly, his leather vest creaking as he approached the station steps. Tate straightened, blocking the path with a posture that screamed authority laced with threat. "You lost, biker. This ain't a rally ground." His voice was oily, laced with the drawl of someone used to deference. Ethan met his eyes level, the scars on his knuckles whitening as he flexed his hands. Not lost. Looking for answers about a boy who showed up with marks that don't come from playing tag. Tommy Harlan, ring any bells? Tate's face hardened, a flicker of unease betraying the facade. He glanced at the deputy, who hovered like a shadow, hand resting near his holster, not drawn, but a silent warning. "Harlan kin? Kid's family business. We handle our own here. You outsiders stirring mud just makes it worse." The words hung heavy, the sun glinting off Tate's badge like a mocking star. Ethan felt the ethical chasm yawn beneath them. This man, sworn to protect, was the very barrier to justice, his corruption a poison seeping into the county's soil. Memories surged, his wife's frail hand in his during those final hospital nights, her whisper of a promise to shield the broken. Ethan had faltered once, retreating to the road's anonymity, but Tommy's bruises had reignited it, a fire that now burned for the crew's chosen path. From the alley beside the station, Lila emerged, her stride purposeful, toolkit swinging like a subtle weapon. She'd looped back from the clinic, Abigail confirming the report. Official notes on signs of ongoing distress, enough to warrant an external review if they could bypass Tate's influence. "Sheriff," she said, voice steady as a wrench turning a bolt, "that boy's got a story. We saw the evidence ourselves. You going to ignore it, or is this how Willow Creek keeps the peace?" Tate's eyes narrowed, assessing her, the woman with grease under her nails and a gaze that pierced like a medic's scalpel. The street had quieted, locals peering from shop doors, the air thick with anticipation. A pickup rumbled past, its driver slowing to gawk, the scent of diesel cutting through the heat. Tension coiled tighter, the sheriff's hand twitching toward his radio. "You think a pack of road dogs can waltz in and play hero? I've got the law on my side." But his bluff cracked as Marcus and a few others materialized from the periphery, Noah crossing with a limp that belied his resolve. Another rider, Samuel Bolt Hayes, a wiry electrician with a quick laugh masking war-torn nerves, positioning himself at the curb. The crew didn't surround. They simply were, a wall of quiet solidarity that amplified the moral weight. Ethan stepped closer, voice low but carrying like thunder on the plains. "Law's only as good as the man wearing the badge. Tommy's uncle's rage is your blind spot, Tate. We've got witnesses, reports from the clinic. Step aside, or the whole county hears how you protect the wrong kind." Tate's face flushed, the veins in his neck pulsing like fault lines. He barked an order to the deputy. "Get cars out to the trailer now." But the command faltered as his phone buzzed insistently. He answered, listening, his expression shifting from bluster to calculation. The call was from the clinic. No doubt, Abigail's doing, leveraging her credentials to loop in a state overseer outside Tate's reach. The sheriff pocketed the device, jaw grinding. "This ain't over. You touch that family, and you're all accessories." But he backed toward the door, the threat hollow against the crew's unyielding front. As he retreated inside, the blinds snapping shut, a ripple of murmurs spread through the onlookers. Justice's first crack in the facade. Ethan exhaled, the knot in his chest loosening fractionally, but the victory tasted of ash. This was no clean win. Tate's retreat meant retaliation brewing in shadowed offices and backroom deals. Marcus clapped his shoulder, the gesture an anchor in the swelling doubt. "Held the line, brother." Kids turning the tide. They dispersed subtly, engines purring to life as they regrouped at the mill's edge, the river's flow a soothing counterpoint to the adrenaline's ebb. Tommy waited there, bandaged and brighter-eyed, recounting his checkup to Lila with wide gestures. The boy hugged Ethan's leg, a small voice whispering, "They believed me." In that embrace, the promise deepened, redemption not just for one, but for the fractured souls riding beside him. Yet as the afternoon waned, casting golden hues over the cotton fields, new shadows loomed. A scout reported the uncle fleeing the trailer, tires spinning gravel toward the county line, perhaps to bury evidence or summon allies. Ethan's mind raced with dilemmas, pursue and risk escalation, or fortify their stand. The crew gathered in the mill's yard, voices overlapping in strategic murmurs, Noah sketching a rough map on the dirt, Abigail advocating for legal channels now open. Loyalty bound them, but the cost whispered of sacrifices ahead, possible arrests, fractured trusts, the ethical razor of forcing change without becoming the chaos they fought. Ethan traced the vow's emblem on his vest, the serpent's coil a reminder. Honor demanded they press on, unbreaking. The sun dipped lower, painting the silos in fiery strokes, and Ethan felt the weight of the awakening promise. Willow Creek's underbelly was stirring, truths clawing toward the light. The bikers' intervention, a catalyst for the county's profound shock. One boy's courage had summoned a brotherhood, forging justice from the embers of old oaths, and the road ahead promised trials that would test every scar and vow. If this chapter's got your blood pumping with that raw sense of justice, smash that like button. It helps these stories of redemption reach more hearts in need. The afternoon light slanted through the mill's cracked windows like golden shards, fracturing the dust motes into fleeting constellations as the crew huddled in the shadowed yard. Ethan leaned against a weathered beam, the rough wood biting into his palms, grounding him amid the rising tide of uncertainty. The river murmured below, its current a relentless whisper of time slipping away, carrying the scent of damp earth and distant wildflowers on the breeze. Tommy sat cross-legged on the blanket nearby, a fresh bandage peeking from his sleeve, his small face alight with the wonder of the gathered riders, strangers turned guardians in the span of a day. Lila knelt beside him, sketching crude maps on a scrap of paper, her voice a steady hum explaining the good guys who fix things without breaking them. But Ethan's gaze drifted to the horizon, where thunderheads gathered like unspoken regrets, mirroring the storm brewing in his chest. Marcus paced the dirt, his boots carving furrows in the soft ground, phone clutched like a talisman. Uncle's van peeled out 10 minutes ago, heading east toward Blackridge Pass. Scouts say he's not alone, picked up a tale that smells like Tate's off-book muscle. The words landed heavy, rippling through the group like a stone in still water. Noah shifted on his crutch, the faint whir of his prosthetic cutting the quiet, his eyes narrowing under the brim of his faded cap. Pass is a dead end for runners. Old logging roads, no cell out there. If he's dumping evidence or holing up, we cut him off clean. Abigail crossed her arms, her nurse's scrubs dusted with mill grit, the empathy in her voice tempered by steel. No rushing in blind. We've got the clinic report, state eyes are turning, push too hard and Tate spins it as us the aggressors. Samuel nodded from the sidelines, his fingers absently twisting a wire from his toolkit, a habit from knights wiring safe houses in forgotten campaigns. Ethan felt the weight of their stares, the unspoken question hanging in the thickening air. Was this the line where loyalty tipped into peril? His mind replayed the station standoff, Tate's retreating shadow, the crack in the sheriff's armor, but victory felt fragile, like chrome polished over rust. The promise to his wife, that vow to shield the vulnerable, had pulled him from solitude, but now it entangled the crew in Willow Creek's thorns. Tommy looked up then, his eyes searching Ethan's face, and the boy extended a grubby hand, palm upturned. "You won't let them take me back, right? Like you promised." The words pierced, simple as a child's trust, yet they anchored Ethan deeper into the moral fray. He clasped the small hand, the warmth seeping through calluses worn by years of gripping handlebars against the wind. "Not a chance, kid. We're the vow. Words like ours don't bend." The decision crystallized in the fading light, the sun dipping behind the silos to paint their edges in crimson. They'd intercept at the pass, not with force, but presence, a wall of engines and unyielding truth to force the uncle's hand. Lila revved her bike first, the engine's throaty purr vibrating through the ground like a heartbeat quickening. Tommy climbed onto the passenger seat behind her, helmet snug, his grip tentative but growing firmer with each mile. The convoy formed in loose formation, 20 strong now, shadows lengthening as they rolled out, tires humming over the cracked blacktop. The road to Blackridge twisted through scrub oak and sagebrush, the air cooling to carry the sharp tang of pine resin and exhaust. Ethan led the flank, wind whipping his vest, the serpent emblem fluttering like a banner of forgotten wars. Flashes of memory intruded, desert nights with Marcus, sharing canteen water under starlit skies, oaths sworn in blood, and brotherhood that time had tested, but never severed. As the pass narrowed, the terrain turned rugged, boulders jutting like ancient guardians, the river's roar echoing from a ravine below. Scout signals came via handhelds, the van ahead, slowing at a pullout where a derelict cabin squatted, its roof sagging under vines. Ethan signaled a halt, engines cutting to a hush that amplified the wind's sigh through the trees. They dismounted silently, boots silent on pine needles, forming a perimeter with the grace of hunters who preferred words to weapons. The uncle, a gaunt man named Victor Harlan, Tommy's shadow in flesh, emerged from the cabin, arguing in low tones with two figures in unmarked jackets, their postures screaming hired muscle. Papers rustled in Victor's hands, perhaps ledgers or notes meant to vanish into the underbrush. Ethan stepped forward first, the crew fanning out behind him like wings of resolve. "Victor Harlan," he called, voice carrying clear over the ravine's edge, steady as the chain on his bike. The man spun, face paling in the twilight, eyes darting to the encircling riders. "This ain't your business, stranger. Kid's mine to handle." But the bluster faltered as Tommy's voice piped up from Lila's side. "No, you hurt me, and Mama just watches." The words hung raw and indicting, the boy's courage a spark igniting the ethical blaze. Victor lunged for the papers, but Noah intercepted smoothly, his crutch a barrier more than a hindrance, while Abigail approached with open hands, her medic's calm diffusing the air. "We know about the favors, Victor. Tate's not covering this one. Hand it over. End it right." Tension peaked as the hired men shifted, hands hovering near pockets, the scent of sweat and fear mingling with the pine. Marcus's presence loomed, a thunderhead of restraint, his low growl a reminder. The vow fought shadows, not flesh. Victor hesitated, the weight of exposure cracking his resolve, and the papers tumbled to the dirt. Receipts for quiet payments, notes on overlooked incidents that painted a web of complicity. Ethan knelt to gather them, the pages crinkling like confessions, his heart pounding with the moral gravity. This wasn't conquest, it was the quiet unraveling of corruption, loyalty's light piercing the dark. Victor slumped against the cabin wall, muttering defeat, as the crew secured the scene without a raised fist, calling in the state line directly, voices calm on the radio. Dusk settled as they rode back. The evidence clutched like a sacred relic, the engine's chorus a triumphant undertone to the night's embrace. Tommy leaned against Lila, exhaustion claiming him, but a smile ghosted his lips. Ethan glanced back, the boy's trust a balm to his scars, deepening the bond of their chosen family. Yet doubt lingered in the cooling air. Tate's retaliation would come, sharper now, testing the vow's unbreakable core. The county's shock deepened, promises awakening to forge a legacy of honor amid the gathering storm. Willow Creek trembled on the edge, redemption's path winding toward a climax that would demand every ounce of their silent courage. The twilight deepened over Blackridge Pass, like a velvet shroud, the pines standing sentinel as the last rays bled into the ravine below. Ethan holstered the radio, the state trooper's confirmation crackling faintly in the cooling air. A promise of impartial eyes arriving within the hour. Victor Harlan sat slumped against the cabin's weathered wall, his hands bound loosely with zip ties from Samuel's toolkit. The fight drained from him like air from a punctured tire. The papers lay secured in Lila's saddlebag, their edges curling like guilty secrets exposed to the open sky. The hired muscle had scattered into the underbrush at the first wail of distant sirens, vanishing like smoke, but their absence only amplified the weight of what remained. A broken man and the unraveling of Willow Creek's hidden fractures. Ethan turned to the crew, their faces etched in the dimming light. Marcus's broad shoulders squared against the gathering dusk, Noah leaning on his crutch with quiet vigilance, Abigail's eyes scanning Victor for any sign of hidden desperation. Tommy clung to Lila's leg, the boy's small frame silhouetted against the fading gold, his gaze fixed on his uncle with a mix of fear and fragile resolve. The air carried the sharp bite of pine sap and the faint, acrid tang of fear sweat, mingling with the river's steady rush far below. "It's done," Ethan said, his voice a low anchor in the hush. "No more shadows for you, Victor. The truth's out. Your rages, the payoffs to Tate. The county'll see it plain." Victor's head lifted, eyes hollowed by the weight of exposure, muttering, "You don't know what you're stirring. Tate's got roots deeper than this dirt." But the words fell flat, echoing the defeat of a man who'd wielded power through intimidation, now facing the unyielding wall of loyalty. The ride back unfolded under a canopy of emerging stars. The convoy's engines, a subdued rumble that vibrated through the earth like a heartbeat, slowing after frenzy. Ethan rode point, the wind tugging at his vest, carrying whispers of sage and cooling soil. Flashes of the day's toll played in his mind. The station's tense standoff, Tommy's trusting hand, the crew's seamless unity, a chosen family reborn from the ashes of his solitude. Grief for his wife had chained him to endless roads, but this boy's bruises had snapped the links, reigniting the vow he'd buried. Redemption wasn't a solitary path. It was this, the shared burden lightened by bonds forged in quiet honor. Tommy rode with Lila, his helmet bobbing as he pointed at fireflies flickering along the roadside, a child's wonder piercing the gravity. By the time they reached the mill, full night had claimed the sky, the silos looming like dark monoliths under a crescent moon. State troopers waited in the yard, their cruisers' lights casting blue strobes across the gravel, turning the scene into a tableau of stark revelation. Victor was handed over without resistance, the papers surrendered in a rustle that sealed fates. The lead trooper, a stern woman named Captain Ellis with a no-nonsense braid and eyes sharpened by years on the line, nodded to Ethan. "This ties into 3 open cases. Overlooked reports, pattern of favors. Tate's office is under review as we speak. Good eyes, all of you." The crew stood silent, a circle of leather and resolve, their presence a testament to justice's moral poetry. Not brute force, but the persistent light of truth against corruption's veil. Words spread through Willow Creek like ripples in a storm-tossed pond. By midnight, the sheriff's station buzzed with external investigators, Tate's bluster crumbling under the flood of evidence, ledgers unearthed from his desk, witness statements from locals emboldened by the biker's stand. The county awoke to headlines in the Morning Gazette, fictional but fervent. Biker Brotherhood exposes Sheriff's Shadow Network. Coffee shops hummed with shocked murmurs, families like Tommy's exhaling breaths held too long. Grace at the general store poured free rounds for the crew when they rolled in at dawn, her kind eyes misty. "You gave this town its spine back," she said, sliding mugs across the counter scented with fresh brew and cinnamon. Ethan sat with Tommy at a corner table, the boy devouring pancakes stacked like victory towers, syrup glistening under the diner's warm lamps. The bruises on his arms were fading already, bandaged with care by Abigail, who sat nearby sketching notes for follow-up care. "Mama's coming home soon," Tommy said between bites, his voice brighter than the neon sign outside. "The nice lady said she'll get help too." Ethan ruffled the boy's hair, the gesture simple yet profound, echoing the promise that had started it all. Marcus joined them, sliding into the booth with a grin cracking his weathered face. "Tate's suspended, State's taking the wheel, Victor's facing charges that stick this time. You pulled us back together, Ridge. Vows stronger for it." But as the sun climbed, gilding the cotton fields in renewal, Ethan stepped outside, the air crisp with the promise of rain finally breaking. Lila leaned against her bike, toolkit at her feet, her ink-black hair catching the light. "Doubts easing?" she asked, reading the furrow in his brow. He nodded, tracing the serpent emblem on his vest, the unbroken chain of oaths that had weathered wars, losses, and lonely miles. "Feels like coming home," he admitted, the words carrying the gravel of truth. His wife's memory lingered, not as a ghost, but a guiding light, her vow fulfilled through this act of silent courage. The crew gathered loosely, engines idling like contented beasts, sharing nods and low laughs that wove their chosen family tighter. Tommy ran out then, hugging Ethan's leg with syrup-sticky hands, his laugh a melody against the morning's hush. "Will you visit? Like family?" The question hung, pure and piercing, and Ethan knelt, meeting the boy's eyes. "Every chance, kid. Promises like ours don't end." The county's shock lingered in the air, a profound shift from whispered fears to open accountability, justice's quiet triumph over entrenched rot. Willow Creek breathed easier, its foundations tested and true, all sparked by one scared boy's trust and a biker's awakened heart. As the convoy prepared to scatter back to their roads, Ethan mounted his Harley. The engine's roar a farewell laced with forever. Redemption had come not in blaze, but in the steady burn of loyalty, leaving a legacy of honor that echoed across the plains. The iron vow rode on, unbreakable, their oaths a beacon for the overlooked. Thank you for riding this journey with us. Stories like Tommy's remind us that one act of courage can change everything. If this tale of promises and chosen family touched you, hit that subscribe button and join the crew for more tales of quiet heroism. Your support keeps the road open for redemption.